Welcome to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I'm your host, Shola Richards, aka Brother Teresa. I've spoken to tens of thousands of people all over the world about the importance of kindness. And I am obsessed with how we can bring more kindness into our daily lives and restore balance to a deeply unbalanced world. Every episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies to create a kinder world, and I'll do it in 30 minutes or less. No fluff, just valuable, actionable content that you can implement in your life immediately after listening to help you actively create a kinder world. There's no time to waste. Let's dive in. Welcome back, my friend. It's an honor that you're here for episode 11 of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Today, we're tackling one of the biggest threats to kindness in our modern world: misinformation and disinformation. As I wrote in my book, Civil Unity, when people believe information that is factually inaccurate, it can accelerate erosion of trust in our fellow humans, deepen existing divisions in society, amplify unproductive disagreements, and inspire fear, hate, and even violence. Misinformation and disinformation both involve spreading false information, but their intent is very different. So before we dive in, let's ensure that we're both operating from the same definitions with this misinformation and disinformation stuff. Misinformation is when false information is spread without the intent to harm or deceive others. It's like repeating a rumor that you heard about your new neighbor having a criminal record without actually verifying if it's true. Disinformation, on the other hand, is about intentionally spreading false information with the intent to harm and deceive others. An example would be someone using AI to create a manipulated video of you saying or doing something that you actually did not say or do. Both misinformation and disinformation have very real life consequences. Think about this sobering statistic. According to a 2020 NPR Ipsos poll, 17% of Americans believed in a completely baseless conspiracy theory about Satan-worshiping elites running a child sex ring. Even more concerning, an additional 37% said they didn't know if it was true or not. That means, mathematically, over half of Americans either believed in or were open to believing something with absolutely no factual basis. I don't know about you, but that's horrifying to me. If you and I believe that 2 plus 2 equals 4, but our neighbor thinks that 2 plus 2 equals Tuesday, that's a problem. Thankfully, in today's episode, I'll give you 3 practical strategies that help you not only avoid this problem, but more importantly, become a truth seeker in an age of information overload. First, we'll explore the power of strategic questioning to verify what you hear. Next, I'll teach you the professional fact checker technique called lateral reading. I love this. I think it's life-changing. And finally, we'll master the art of cross-referencing to separate fact from fiction. So whether you're trying to navigate social media claims, evaluate news stories, or have productive conversations with people who see the world differently from you, this episode will equip you with the tools that you need to move forward. Let's begin our journey toward a kinder world by becoming misinformation-resistant citizens, starting today. For our first kindness strategy of the episode, let me start with a story that changed how I think about information forever. When I was growing up, my late father was a college professor and one of the most intellectually curious people I have ever known. My dad was born in Freetown, Sierra Leone, and to me, he was like Mufasa from The Lion King. Whenever I would make a bold claim as a teenager, he would respond with one simple question that used to drive me absolutely insane. He would say in his accent, "Shola, how do you know that, boy?" At the time, I thought he was just being difficult, but I realize now that he was teaching me one of the most valuable life skills imaginable: the ability to think critically about information before accepting it as truth. The question, how do you know that, is the foundation of what I call strategic questioning, and it's your first line of defense against misinformation and disinformation. Here's why this question is so powerful. It forces you to examine the source and quality of your information. Most of the time when we encounter information that confirms our existing beliefs or triggers a strong emotional reaction, we accept it without question. But that's exactly when we need to be the most careful. Let me give you a real world example. A few months ago, I was at a dinner party where someone confidently stated that crime rates in my beloved city of Los Angeles had increased by 50% in the past year. It was presented as fact, and several people at the party started expressing concern and sharing their own stories about feeling unsafe. Instead of joining into the conversation or arguing with this person, I simply asked, "That's really concerning. How do you know that that statistic is true?" The person paused and then admitted that they heard it somewhere, but couldn't recall the source. This opened the door for much more productive conversation about the difference between perception and reality when it comes to crime statistics. The beauty of this question is that it works equally well when you ask it of yourself. Before forming strong opinions on important topics, pause and ask, how do I know this? What's my source? Is the source reliable? Is there actual evidence to support this belief? Strategic questioning becomes especially important when you encounter information that, one, confirms your existing beliefs a little too perfectly, two, makes you feel angry or afraid, three, is designed to trigger an emotional response from you, four, comes from unfamiliar sources, and five, makes extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. Real talk, my friend, it is so hard not to lose our critical thinking skills when we become emotionally hooked by a story. Pausing to ask ourselves, how do I know this is true, is an excellent way not to fall down the rabbit hole of misinformation. And falling down that rabbit hole is incredibly common these days. Misleading headlines, taken out of context studies, powerful politicians stoking fear and division, and sources with hidden agendas are everywhere. But a simple question, how do I know that, can protect you from falling into these very tempting traps. When someone makes a bold claim in a conversation, you can ask this question in a way that's curious rather than confrontational. For example, if your colleague is stating her opinion as fact that the new marketing initiative is guaranteed to fail, ask her, how do you know that? If an extended family member is stating that a common and seemingly innocuous household item causes cancer, simply ask, that's interesting. Where did you see that? Or, I'd love to learn more about that. What's your source? Most people will appreciate your genuine interest in understanding their perspective. And if we're really going to be real here, most people don't have the receipts to back up the things that they believe in. Sometimes they'll discover that they heard it from a friend, saw it on social media, or that they remembered it from somewhere, but can't recall where. That's valuable information that tells you that the claim might not be on solid ground as it initially seemed. Other times, you might learn that their information comes from a credible source, and then you can explore it together. Either way, though, my friend, you're raising the quality of the conversation and modeling critical thinking, both of which are desperately needed these days. Here's the key. This isn't about being skeptical of everything or refusing to believe anything. It's about appropriately being cautious with information, especially when the stakes are high or the claims are significant. So for your first practical kindness takeaway of the episode, for next week, whenever you encounter a piece of information that seems surprising, confirms your existing beliefs, or triggers a strong emotional reaction, pause, take a beat, and ask yourself, how do I know that's true? Then dedicate the time to investigate the source before accepting it as fact or sharing it with others. This simple habit can dramatically reduce your vulnerability to misinformation and help you to build a more accurate understanding of the world around you. It's a small investment of time that pays huge dividends in terms of being a more informed citizen. Now let's move to our second kind of strategy of the episode, a technique that professional fact checkers use every single day. Have you ever wondered how professional fact checkers can quickly determine whether a piece of online information or a source is credible? They use a technique called lateral reading, and it's a strategy that you can easily learn and apply in your everyday life. I learned about this from fascinating research conducted by Stanford University researchers Sam Weinberg and Sarah McGrew. They want to understand how folks evaluate the credibility of information online, so they observed three distinct groups of people. One, PhD historians, two, college students, and three, 30 professional fact checkers, and put them through a really cool experiment. The results were eye-opening. Stick with me on this. So, the three groups were given two articles to read about the topic of bullying. One of the articles was written by a legitimate professional organization, and the other article was written by a far less credible organization that was actually labeled as a hate group. Here's the sneaky part. Both organizations had similar and very credible sounding names. So, what were the results? Here's what's interesting. The PhD historians and college students were easily fooled and determined that both articles about bullying were equally credible from both sites. But the professional fact checkers were quickly and unanimously able to tell that only one of the two organizations were able to credibly talk about bullying. So, what made the difference? What made the difference was how they approached the evaluation process. Most people read vertically, meaning that they stay on the article that they're examining and look for signs of credibility within the article itself. They check for like professional design, proper grammar, and other surface indicators of legitimacy. This is what the PhD historians and the college students did, and it led them astray. But the professional fact checkers, on the other hand, read laterally, meaning that they immediately left the article after reading it and then opened up new browser tabs to search for information about who was behind the site and the story that they just read. They looked for reviews of the organization, they checked what other reputable sources had to say about this website, and they investigated the backgrounds of the authors. This approach completely changes your ability to spot misinformation, and here's how you can practice lateral reading in your everyday life. First, when you encounter an unfamiliar website making bold claims, resist the urge to take what they're saying at face value. Instead, open new browser tabs and search for information about the organization itself. Second, look up the authors or the founders. What are their credentials? Are they recognized experts in the field that they're writing about? Do they have other credible sources quoted or referenced their work? Third, search for reviews from independent and trusted sources. Has anyone else evaluated the organization's claims? Are there fact checks available? And fourth, check if mainstream scientific, academic, or journalistic institutions recognize or cite this source. If credible organizations aren't referencing their work, that's often a red flag. This works for social media posts too. If someone shares a surprising statistic or an alarming claim, don't just read the post in the comments. Open a new browser tab and search for information about both the claim itself and who's making it. Let me walk you through a practical example. Say you encounter a website claiming that a popular medical treatment has dangerous side effects that mainstream medicine does not want you to know about. Instead of reading their articles and testimonials, you would ideally do 4 things. 1, search for the organization's name, plus add words like review, reliable, or credible to the search. 2, look up the medical credentials of their featured doctors. 3, check if major medical organizations like the CDC, WHO, or medical journals have addressed their claims. And 4, see if fact-checking organizations have evaluated their content. If so, you may quickly discover that the source has been flagged for spreading medical misinformation, that their experts aren't actually qualified in the relevant fields, or that legitimate medical organizations have specifically debunked their claims. The key insight here is that legitimate, credible sources welcome scrutiny. They want the smoke. They're transparent about their funding, their methods, and their credentials. Questionable sources, on the other hand, often try to keep you within their own ecosystem of information, or their ecosystem of misinformation. Lateral reading isn't about being cynical or distrusting of everything. It's about being appropriately cautious and doing your due diligence before accepting important information. I should note that this technique requires a bit more time than just reading an article straight through. But considering how much misinformation and disinformation can impact our beliefs, our relationships, and even our health and safety, I personally believe it's time well spent. Your second practical takeaway is this. The next time you're researching an important topic online, commit to practicing lateral reading. When you find a source making a significant claim, spend at least 10 minutes researching the author or the organization in separate browser tabs before accepting their information as reliable. This habit of moving laterally across the internet rather than diving deeply into a single piece of information will dramatically improve your ability to spot misinformation and disinformation, and more importantly, will help you to make more informed decisions. Now let's explore our third and final kindness strategy for defeating misinformation and disinformation. Hey, fellow kindness extremists, it's me, Shola. If you're picking up what I'm putting down, if you're mowing what I'm growing, if you're smelling what I'm stepping in. Okay, I'll stop. If you're enjoying what you're listening to so far, I would love it if you would take a moment to hit the subscribe button and leave a rating and a review. Those incredibly kind acts go so far in helping me to reach as many people as possible who will join the movement to actively create a kinder world. I appreciate you so much, my friend. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Our third kind of strategy for defeating misinformation and disinformation is cross-referencing, and it might be the most important skill you develop in our information-saturated world. Cross-referencing is about checking multiple credible sources to verify information before accepting it as true or before sharing it with others. It's particularly crucial for breaking news, viral social media posts, or any claim that seems designed to provoke a strong emotional reaction. Let me share a personal example that illustrates both the importance and the challenge of cross-referencing. In January 2020, I started seeing posts all over social media claiming that basketball legend and my all-time favorite basketball player, Kobe Bryant, died in a helicopter crash. My first reaction was complete disbelief. It seemed like the kind of celebrity death hoax stuff that regularly circulates online. However, rather than immediately dismissing it as fake news or sharing it as breaking news, I did what I always do with shocking information. I cross-referenced. I checked several major news outlets. ESPN, I started there because it was a sports story. Then I went to the Associated Press and then to NPR. When I saw the same tragic information being reported by multiple reputable sources, I knew with heartbreak that the story was likely true. This principle applies to all types of information, but it's especially important for claims that align with our existing beliefs or trigger strong emotions. When information makes us angry, frightened, or vindicated, our critical thinking skills often take a backseat to our emotional responses. That's exactly why inflammatory content spreads so quickly on social media. It actually bypasses our rational thinking. Consider this scenario. You see a social media post claiming that a politician who you strongly dislike made an offensive statement. The post includes a short video clip that seems to show the politician saying exactly that. Your first instinct might be to feel outraged and share it immediately because, as mentioned, you already can't stand this politician. But before reacting, I'm going to challenge you to cross-reference. Look for the full video to try to understand the context. Then, check if reputable news organizations are reporting on the statement. Search for fact checks on the claim as well. You might discover that the clip was edited to remove important context, that it's actually several years old being presented as recent, or that it's been completely taken out of context. If you've done all of your homework and it passed all the necessary checks, then sure, feel free to share it. Do what you got to do. If not, though, then please summon the impulse control not to share it and add to the sea of misinformation that we're currently drowning in right now. This may be hard to hear, but I'm going to say it anyway. Just because something aligns with what we believe in doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Here's a practical approach to cross-referencing that you can use right away. First, create a mental list of diverse, reputable sources that you trust. These should include sources that represent different perspectives but maintain high journalistic standards. For example, you might include major newspapers, wire services like the Associated Press or Reuters, and fact-checking organizations. Second, when you encounter questionable information, especially on emotional topics, check how at least 3 of these sources are reporting on it. Are they all covering the story? Are the basic facts consistent across sources? If some sources aren't covering it at all, that might be significant to know. Third, pay attention to what these sources emphasize versus what the original claim emphasized. Often the most important context gets lost when stories are spread through social media. Let's use an example. Imagine that you saw a viral social media post claiming that a certain study proved a controversial point about climate change. This post had thousands of shares and seemed very convincing, but instead of accepting the post at face value, you decided to cross-reference it first. In doing so, you discovered some very interesting things. You found that only a few fringe websites were reporting on this controversial point. You also found that mainstream science journalism outlets weren't covering it at all. And you also found that the actual study, when you discovered it, said something quite different from what the viral post had claimed. And lastly, you discovered that climate scientists on social media were pointing out that the study was being misrepresented. In this example, your diligent cross-referencing process revealed that this was likely a case of a legitimate scientific study being misrepresented and sensationalized to support a particular agenda. Unfortunately, stuff like this happens all the time. But you know what doesn't happen all the time, though? People being willing to do the legwork to cross-reference information like I just previously described. Cross-referencing also helps you understand the difference between facts and interpretation. Multiple sources might agree that an event happened, but interpret its significance very differently. That's actually healthy. It helps you to understand the complexity of issues rather than accepting oversimplified narratives. Be especially careful with information that's designed to make you feel angry or afraid. These emotions can cloud our judgment and make us more likely to accept and share information without the proper verification. The more intense your emotional reaction to a piece of information, the more important it becomes to cross-reference before acting on it. So, my friend, your third practical takeaway is this: create a personal cross-reference toolkit with 3 to 5 diverse, reputable news sources that you really, really trust. When you encounter questionable information, especially on emotionally charged or divisive topics, commit to checking how these sources are reporting on it before forming your final opinion or sharing it with others. This may add a few minutes to your online web surfing. Sure, that's fair, but it can save you from embarrassment, protect your relationships, and help you to be part of the kind of solution rather than part of the misinformation and disinformation problem. We've covered a lot of ground today, my friend. Let's recap our 3 strategies for becoming misinformation and disinformation resistant. 1, practice strategic questioning by asking, how do I know that? Before accepting or sharing information. 2, use lateral reading to investigate sources rather than just consuming their content. And 3, cross-reference important claims across multiple reputable sources before drawing conclusions. To be clear, these aren't just academic exercises, they're practical tools that can help us navigate the abundance of information that's out there and contribute to creating a kinder world that's based firmly in facts. When we fall prey to misinformation or disinformation, we don't just form inaccurate beliefs about the world, we lose trust in each other. We become more polarized and become less able to work together to solve our shared problems. But when we commit to seeking truth, when we approach information with both a healthy skepticism and a genuine openness, we build a stronger foundation of kindness that our world desperately needs. Think about how different our conversations would be if everyone practiced these 3 simple strategies. We might still disagree on important issues, but at least we'd be disagreeing about facts rather than made up nonsense. We'd be able to find common ground more easily because we'd be working from a shared understanding of reality. And that's what this kindness extremist movement is all about. Not eliminating disagreement, but making sure that our disagreements are productive and ideally based in truth. So, my friend, I challenge you this week and beyond this week, ideally, to put these strategies into practice. The next time you're about to believe or share something that you read online, pause and run it through these 3 filters. You'll be doing your part to create a world where truth matters and productive dialogue is possible. And if so, you'll actively make the world a kinder place in the process. This is your host, Shola Richards, and you now know that kindness cannot be weak because you just experienced the strength of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Until next time, my friend, the journey to a kinder world continues. Thank you for listening to the Kindness Extremist podcast. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I have one favor to ask. If you could kindly hit the subscribe button, leave a rating and a review, not only would that be incredibly kind, but by doing so, you're actively playing a role in growing this movement and ideally getting us one step closer to creating a kinder world. I hope to see you next week for another episode of the Kindness Extremist podcast. Bye for now.